So today we're kind of going off of last week where we were kind of talking a little bit about kidney function and how to improve that. So more than just diabetes to the health, of course. And today we're focusing more on liver function. So we're talking about improving liver function, and intermittent fasting is one of those ways to do that. It's not usually a highly discussed topic when it comes to it for people with diabetes, just because of the trickiness of changing insulin doses. But we're going to talk about how sometimes it's a good way to reset your system to become a little bit more insulin sensitive, and why some type 1s start to kind of feel like type 2s from time to time. That insulin dose kind of goes up. Insulin doesn't work as well as it used to. So this first slide, we're just kind of recapping a little bit of that kidney function. I just wanted to just go over that one more time, just really quickly, talking about preventing dehydration, drinking an adequate amount of water daily, trying to get close to 2 to 3 liters. It's not anything you have to feel bad if you don't, but dehydration can occur quite quickly with longer bouts of diarrhea or vomiting. That's one of the main reasons why we start to get sick and decompensate. We lose potassium, we lose sodium, or we have too much of it, and those imbalances can kind of leave us feeling really bad and kind of mess with the kidneys. Another way to improve kidney function is exercise. It just helps improve blood circulation and blood pressure. It helps more toxins to be processed and eliminated through the kidneys. So if you just think about our traffic and we got that 30-mile speed limit going on, that exercise helps improve that blood circulation. We get a little higher speed limit of 50 to 60. So it's able to kind of process a little bit more toxins and eliminate those from your body. The other key takeaway when it comes to kidneys is keep your GFR lab value as high as possible. Less than 60 milliliters per minute just means acute or chronic kidney disease. That's not anywhere close to dialysis by any means, but it's just a good lab value to stay in touch with and be on top of when it comes to it. And we're just going into liver function here for this next one. So, and we're talking about that because fasting is just one way to help improve that liver function. One of the main jobs of the liver is to clear the body of toxins and waste. And what fasting does or can do is can give the liver a break from storing and processing energy, basically. You'll see this top picture up here where it kind of has that normal liver, and then it's got that fattier liver. So when it doesn't have too much room, it tries to make room. That's why the liver gets a little bit fattier, but it also has these deposits in it. So it makes it harder to kind of work. It's like being in that office space, having a lot of clutter in there, it makes it a little bit harder to work. Now it takes a lot of time before the liver gets a little bit fattier like this. Now, food that we eat, of course, takes energy and time to break down. There's no shortage of that nowadays when it comes to it in our culture. We're supposed to eat 6 small meals daily. So this is kind of trying to balance it out, talking about there's fast and famine a little bit, and there's benefits of that famine from time to time. Food also often has inflammatory agents which slow down the body and the liver. And liver inflammation is how we measure liver disease. So sometimes when you get a blood draw, you'll get some labs come back that say AST or ALT, and you'll see that on that right-hand side where it says the function test in the normal range. Those are the 2 most common ones. Alkaline phosphatase is another one too. Now, if your numbers are towards the higher side, that's not necessarily a bad or a good. It's good to get the baseline and stuff. But ideally, you still want it to be kind of a little bit more towards the middle or the lower range. All these markers, all they do is they just measure how much inflammation is going to happen in the liver. Now, these can go up to 100 or 500 sometimes when you're getting into hepatitis B or hepatitis C, but we're not talking about that. Usually with fatty liver, we can start to detect that when it's in the 40s or the 50s, sometimes even the 30s too. And another way you might start to notice this a little bit is you might be becoming more insulin resistant. And so I got a couple of pictures here just kind of showing the normal liver. And in our normal American diet, we're constantly eating, so that liver is constantly storing and processing extra glucose. It stores extra because our ancestors went many days without eating, so it has that kind of a rainy day. But after the storage starts to go up a little bit too high, you start to become a little bit more resistant, and that prevents further fat storage on the liver. Basically, it's a mechanism to protect the liver from taking on too much, basically, storing too much. I'm going to keep on explaining these things, but just let me know if I'm speaking Greek or if there's a better way to explain that at all. So this is a common question that I usually get. Why does my blood sugar rise when I don't eat? Does anybody have that issue from time to time?
Yep.
Your hand up and stuff. You're like, I didn't eat. I was purposely doing this. What the heck? And my blood sugar goes up. All right. So one of those reasons that we're going to kind of break that down is gluconeogenesis. This is when the liver creates and stores energy for future use when it's needed. Now, our body, in our current culture of eating so often, it's a lot different than what it used to be. We used to be maybe storing up for the winter time. Our ancestors, they didn't have as much food around and available for them. So what our liver learns to do is store a lot extra. Now, when we're not using it during those periods when we're fasting, our liver starts to open up old containers basically of glucose, and that's what can cause that higher blood sugar rise. So essentially, the more the storage the liver has, and that includes the fat cells too, we kind of saw a couple of those pictures in the previous slide, the higher the glucose will rise. But if you're fasting a little bit more and more, you start to empty out that extra storage in that liver. And as that decreases more and more, you won't see spikes as big and you won't see them as often. Another common question that we get is it's dangerous to skip a meal. So to really break this down further, there's only a couple populations where that can be the case. And we're not talking about diabetes necessarily. We're talking about burn or trauma victims. And that's because those people require a lot more energy to rebuild tissue. And they're going through tissue quite often. They're rebuilding their tissue a lot. So usually their energy demands go up a lot higher. But essentially, no, it's not dangerous to skip a meal. So what we kind of were told so many times and force fed, it is not going to hurt us that much when it comes to it. What we originally thought and kind of the reasoning behind the health system telling you not to skip meals and to eat frequent meals is because we thought someone would compensate. They'd like overcompensate and eat even more at one time if they missed the previous meal. And then therefore, that's all the more for the liver to process at one time. It just becomes just a bigger task for it to accomplish.
Brad, I have a question.
Yeah.
How long does it take to see changes in your blood results if you do fasting?
So that's a very good question. Usually it's more, it depends how long you've been doing it. We'll kind of break down a little bit of the fasting, but let's say if you're just doing it by blood sugar and you were just fasting in the mornings, you might notice you're skipping breakfast the first time around, the first few days, your blood sugar might go up a little bit higher, but then over time, it should become lower and lower and lower as you're going for a long period of fasting. That's a great question, but each person takes their own amount of time.
Would you notice though, like the liver values change at some point? Would it affect any of the other blood levels like cholesterol?
Good question. So we're going to bring up a couple studies too that talk about lowering your LDL and increasing your HDL. HDL is supposed to be your good cholesterol. So those do occur. Blood pressure does decrease too, and we'll talk about why that can be something that happens for people. That's more related to the fatty plaques, our body having time to remove things within blood vessels that are blocking flow of blood. What What else is a good lab? So usually your doctor will not go over the ALT and AST and the ALP. Those are your liver enzyme ones. And the reason why is because they're going to be within those normal values. But like I said, 40s are still a little bit high. Sometimes higher 30s might be a little bit higher than what we'd like. If you're getting down in those 20s or those teens, that's looking a little bit better. But what you want to take is your own base value. And usually your doctor won't draw that much more than 1 or 2 times per year. But you can look at your AST and your ALT, and you can see, is it a little bit lower than it was last time? So that's kind of over a longer period of time, but that can kind of let you know, is there more inflammation or less inflammation in your liver since the previous time you had it drawn when it comes to it. Now there's some people that even though they have a very fatty liver, they could still be just riding a level that is 30 or high 20s. But for them, that is their high, basically. So it's just kind of seeing, hey, where is your level at? What is it reading at? And then kind of looking at the next ALT or AST. Otherwise, they're all going to be probably normal for a majority of people. It's just, is it a higher normal? Is it improved? That's one way to kind of test to see, is my liver function kind of improving? Is my liver healthier than it was before? That makes sense. So that's a comprehensive metabolic panel. They just draw that usually once per year. And you can see the AST, ALP, and the ALT when it comes to it. Of course, hypoglycemia can occur. So this is not for people that don't really adjust their insulin doses. Because if you don't adjust and we don't eat, over time, even just that same basal insulin will eventually lead towards that low blood sugar when it comes to it. You know, we talked about the morning, we skip a meal or something like that and our blood sugar goes up. Well, still over time, eventually, we're gonna be creeping down towards that low blood sugar as our body starts using up those extra stores of glucose. So, all right, so this is definitely how I felt a lot of times in my life. I'm not hungry, but I'm bored. Therefore, I shall eat. We are incorporating a little bit of the whole person because we are whole people here. And I'm not enforcing spirituality or anything like that, but fasting has been a part of many religions throughout time when it comes to it. Here are a couple more famous quotes that some people had based on fasting. William Secker, he was a writer back in the 17th century saying, by fasting, the body learns to obey the soul. By praying, the soul learns to command the body. So this can be a way to kind of clear your head from some vices that we have. We'll talk about it more, but obviously we can fast from alcohol, we can fast from food, we can fast from gambling. There's so many things we can fast from and kind of get a clear head. Periodic fasting can help clear up the mind and strengthen the body and spirit. That's what we're definitely starting to see scientifically now. We're starting to see stem cell regeneration a little bit more with some fasting. Of course, it's not the easiest topic to have with diabetes because we just got to get a little bit more flexible with our dosing. In the Bible, this is also seen, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. That was kind of Jesus talking about actually trying to heal a few people that maybe had some demons. And they said, there's something about fasting here. Don't exactly know what it is, but there's some special power about fasting there. So there's some quotes. It's going to be a nice kind of dynamic picture. Of course, keep in mind that each body is different. Just because it says hour 18 doesn't mean your body doesn't go into that earlier, or it doesn't mean that it doesn't go into that later when it comes to it. But usually your body is either in storage mode or it's in kind of garage sale mode or cleaning up mode. I just go over the overall definition: to abstain from something for a period of time. I have from something there twice, a little typo. This can be done for things besides food, such as gambling, alcohol, drugs, sugar, phone use, internet use, all the above. We can fast from any of these and sometimes get a little clearer perspective when we're not on that device all the time. God knows I'm not perfect when it comes to that. I've been on Facebook way too much lately, and there hasn't been too many positive stories too, so I need to part ways a little bit more with that. So what we are focusing on primarily is fasting from food and drinks, except for water. I always want to keep that water going. That's why I kind of highlighted those kidneys too. We want to prevent that dehydration from happening. One big question we get, doesn't fasting cause ketones? And aren't ketones bad for people with diabetes? So it's a great question. Yes, it does cause the main fuel source to change into ketones over a period of time. This little chart on the right side kind of goes into, it's got this picture of that BOHB, that's actually just ketones is what's happening there. That's what it's kind of signaling. However, ketones alone do not in itself cause diabetic ketoacidosis. Diabetic ketoacidosis is due to too little or no release of insulin. So that's why it's important to continue taking at least some insulin if people do decide to fast. You don't want to go cold turkey, obviously, if you keep your blood sugars in line. There hasn't been any reports of people having euglycemic DKA. What I mean by euglycemic DKA is DKA at blood sugars of 100 to 200. Usually we only hear DKA happening for people that are above 250 or above 350. But due to the addition of SGLT2s like Invokana, Farxiga, and that, there's been a couple cases where people had some DKA at almost normal blood sugar levels. So fasting is not necessarily associated with that. So I'm just going to kind of review what the picture is on the right side here. It talks about the fed state, our glucose going up, therefore the insulin secretion starts to go up, or the insulin injection in our case and scenario. There is inhibited lipolysis. That just means we are not going to burn through any fats. And so our body is not burning up fat. It's going to be in a storage mode. And it's just saying that's excess intake basically is going to be processed by the liver. The early fasting state, the insulin starts going down and we start using the gluconeogenesis. That's why you see that kind of spike in your blood sugar after missing a meal or fasting for a short period of time. Is because of that. Our liver starts to kind of get rid of this extra it has on it because it wants to work more efficiently. Same thing with us. If we have a heavy backpack, we're carrying around 50 pounds, it's pretty darn nice to be able to like slowly empty that backpack and it gets easier to hike. It's the same thing with the liver. He wants to start unpacking all this extra in him. And what he's unpacking ends up leading to a higher blood sugar for that initial state, if that makes sense. Like I said, slow me down too. Feel free to ask questions with any of this.
Where does hour 24 come in? Is that just between the 18 and the 36?
Yeah, that's a great question. It can come in anywhere in between these. It's different with everybody, but you know, sometimes you can see even, I wouldn't say necessarily the starvation state. You're not going to see that. So I have this picture that, for people that can't view it, the fed state, the post-absorptive, which is the early fasting state, the fasting state, and the starvation state. 24 though, you're going to get a lot more time for your body to go through and start cleaning up extra cell debris, damaged cells, or just other stuff in your body that it doesn't need anymore, basically. So 24, I would say you're in the fasting state as well. But you have a decreased amount of insulin. You start to operate on ketones. This is a big step for people. There's some studies will be showing a little bit later that some people believe that our body starts to operate better off of ketones. Now, we don't know whether that because that's the fuel, or because our body's getting rid of toxins and it just works a little bit easier when it comes to it. So our body is using ketones now as fuel for the brain. What happens is lipolysis. Your body is starting to open up old fat stores. We saw that fatty liver basically. And so it's opening up these old fat stores. It could be glucose containers. It could be other things. I'm not saying like mercury or lead or anything like that, but other toxins that our body just says, I can't get to processing this right now, but I'm going to put it in a container so it doesn't harm anything. So we'll talk about side effects and sometimes how that can occur with some people when they just rush right into a fast and they don't kind of slowly introduce themselves. The starvation state just talks about, once again, decreased insulin, more ketones that your body's using. We'll explain this further in another slide too. Gluconeogenesis. Basically just, yeah, the kidneys are starting to recycle some sugar too in that state because your body's getting worried that you're going to be fasting for too long and you're not going to have enough energy. All right, our next slide just kind of talks about a couple different types of fasting that you might have heard of. Intermittent fasting is one of them, or time restricted feeding. So you can look at either one, like you're fasting for 12 to 16 hours, or that you're only eating for 4 to 10 hours a day. And the rest of the time you're giving that liver a break to clean, remove extra nutrients that aren't needed anymore. Of course, you know, this always includes, you can drink as much water as you want. There's other things that kind of work in the fast too. But intermittent fasting is basically just saying, I'm not going to eat for this amount of time, whether you skip breakfast or whether you skip dinner, or you just kind of eat only 2 meals a day for a short time window. Alternate day fasting is another one that's been studied. That's been studied by an endocrinologist named Dr. Jason Fung. He's got a book called The Diabetes Code, but it's highly geared towards type 2 diabetes when it comes to it, alternate day fasting. But as you know, sometimes type 1 can kind of blur into it when we get a little bit insulin resistant. This gives your body a little bit more time to clean or remove unneeded products and toxins. Remember, when we're storing in stuff, our body cannot get rid of things. So it's either in this storage mode or it's getting rid of things and cleaning up the riffraff, basically. So that's why fasting is not only important kind of to decrease our insulin resistance, but to kind of help our body get a chance to heal and balance things out, kind of reset the clock. What it also does is that longer time of period decreases nutrients to rapidly dividing cells, which we know as cancer. And it gives a lot of cells more chance to die of a natural death. Our cells are continuously being recreated, and there is a process called apoptosis. When that process is triggered, that cell is programmed to naturally die or kill itself. And as we know, cancer, those cells are a little bit more resilient, and sometimes they have different food sources that keep it going. So this is one thing that is also targeted towards cancer treatment. We all know chemotherapy makes us super sick and not want to eat. Well, there might be something behind that not eating stuff to also help those toxic cells start to die, at least when the radiation happens. There's a couple other fasting diets. There's one that's called the fast mimicking diet. And you can see the book in the bottom right-hand corner, The Longevity Diet by Walter Longo. This is a diet that he talks about certain nutrients that you can eat during the fasting period. It's a lower amount of calories. It's more like olive oil, more natural vegetables that you're eating during that period of time, but you're not left with this, I can't eat anything. So some people where the hunger pangs are really tough for them and they don't like fasting, they found that these people on this diet are getting some of those same great effects from fasting or prolonged fasting that they are with a fast mimicking diet. He technically suggests that people do this once every 3 months, because naturally as we get back into our diet, we start to get some of those same foods back in, and then it's just nice to reset our body, lowering our LDL cholesterol, raising our HDL cholesterol, lowering our blood pressure, lowering the triglycerides, kind of removing all the plaque in our arteries is what some of those fasting methods can do. Now, the last version of fasting is the prolonged fasting. And once again, that is not for the faint of heart. That is something that once you've done it for 16 hours and that was not too bad, and you go for 20 hours, and then you're ready to go for more. I have done the prolonged fast for 3 days, 2 times in my life. It can be a little bit hard, sometimes day 2, but if you're drinking some water, usually it passes not too long afterwards. The hardest part is kind of the social atmosphere for me, to be honest, at least in my experience. Food is very social, and when you go out to eat with people, they're kind of asking, why are you fasting? Why are you not eating anything? And so you have to come up with this very interesting story to them, to tell them, you know, I'm losing weight or I'm on a diet and stuff, but they see my twig kind of stature and stuff, and they say, yeah, right. But there's other benefits to this too. Cognitive benefits with reducing your chance of Alzheimer's or Parkinson's and dementia too, with different fasting methods. So like I said, it's not just about diabetes. This can lead to other health benefits. And guess what? It's the most cheap of any medication or any medical regimen that you could possibly do. But of course, we want to make sure that people are safe when they try it. You start very slightly. You do, you know, short amounts of time, see how you do. Try not to push yourself too much.
I have a question, Brad.
Yeah.
So when you had the prolonged fast and you came off it, did your insulin requirements, you know, that first meal, was it a lot less? Did you kind of, I mean, how would, if you came off a longer fast, what would your, you know, your first meal, would you kind of dial it back a little bit?
So that's a great question. I can only answer for me personally. I would say that my basal requirements were still down. I probably needed an extra bolus because my body was so used to not storing and processing food, that I maybe needed maybe a 2-unit more bolus than what I usually would have on that, just as my body gets going. But my basal rate was probably a little bit lower for a period of time. Does that answer that a little bit?
Yes, yeah.
Great question. Anybody else? Hey, Michael. He's brave. I thought he goes by Timmy or something in these. I know he's got a different name. He's got a much more creative name. But anyways, so autophagy. Has anybody heard of autophagy before? Have they heard of that term? Basically, this is something that our body does. And you can kind of see this, the autophagy on the right side. It's something your body does to almost recycle or throw away the garbage that's not needed in your body. So it's a white blood cell that decides to engulf other fragments or debris, and it just goes around like a Pac-Man, basically, engulfing them, processing that, and eliminating the waste. So it helps, it's kind of like a natural killer cell. Like we know that when we get an infection, we get all these guys to that area and they try to kill basically that bacteria or something going on. But this one usually processes when we're in that fasting state. And so it's almost like in the city during the nighttime, you have those cleaners with the sweepers kind of going around and they're cleaning up all the roadways and stuff. That's what they do lots of times when we're sleeping, because we're sleeping, that's kind of our longest fasting state. These guys come in, clean it up, organize things a little bit more, and they reduce the traffic in your blood vessels. you know, and other places in your body. Okay. So autophagy is just kind of the eating of old cells and recycling and getting rid of them in your body if they're not doing you any good. And once again, if we're eating, and that's kind of the recommended diet right now, that 3 small meals and then 3 big meals, our body's never going to have time really for autophagy and to balance out. So one of the reasons with fasting, increased insulin sensitivity, decreased insulin resistance. Why? We're removing that extra storage from the liver. If we have some open shelves after that in that liver to use, it welcomes insulin more freely than it does when the liver has excess amount of storage, if that makes sense. So it just welcomes that insulin a little bit more. It can delay onset and progression of Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's, are a couple of them. Now, Parkinson's is a really interesting one. I was actually doing a clinical with my doctor this last semester, and we found out that GLP-1s, which, you know, allow us to fast a little bit more. We were talking about it at the last presentation. They've been trialed with Parkinson's patients for about 12 years now. And so having more of that fasting state, less eating, clears up some of their dysrhythmic movements. They kind of got shaky hands. And I can give people, if they're interested too, talking about Alzheimer's, how fasting can help with that, decreasing that. Usually Alzheimer's is related to more nighttime eating. I'm not the best at that by any means. I'm not a saint. I usually do more nighttime eating than I do breakfast eating, but I probably will clear that up. And as science advances further, I will probably definitely nip that in the butt. But not eating before bedtime can allow your body to get ready to let the autophages in your brain start to clean up all that extra plaque, that beta amyloid plaque that can cause Alzheimer's. So that's one of the ways to stay healthy and not lose your marbles, so to speak. So yeah, beta amyloid plaque, that's what can cause Alzheimer's, just a buildup of that. If we don't get good sleep, we don't get deep sleep. And that's what sometimes eating before bedtime can do a little bit more of. There was actually studies showing that people were reversing or decreasing the progression of their Alzheimer's by starting that regimen of not eating at least 3 hours before bedtime. But they're also getting better sleep too. So that's a key one as well.
So that kind of goes against, you know, everything I was ever taught, like you're supposed to have protein and something before you went to bed to sleep through the night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of to shut your liver up a little bit. Otherwise, we start to see that spike. If we put our liver into that fed state, it's no longer going to spike that blood sugar as high once it starts to do that gluconeogenesis. So it's a very good, like the healthcare system always use that to lower morning blood sugar sometimes, because it just kind of shuts that liver down from releasing that, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So it may improve blood pressure, LDL, HDL cholesterol, and triglycerides. Will it do one of those for each and every person? Absolutely, but each person is a little bit different depending on the fast, depending on what they do. Why does it do that? How does it improve that? It helps those little autophages go throughout your body. They go sweeping throughout. They see some plaques. They see some things that don't belong there. They start to clean up that plaque or that dam in that blood vessel. If you clean up that traffic in that blood vessel that looked something like this, it had like plaque on all this side, then blood flows a lot better and your blood pressure comes down because of it. It's that extra traffic that causes your heart to beat harder and your blood pressure to go up. So if you get rid of that extra component, that plaque or that fat deposit in your blood vessels, blood pressure goes down, blood flow improves. If that makes sense. Just trying to break that down a little bit. So it doesn't sound so scientific. We talked a little bit about how it weakens rapidly dividing cells like cancer. It also decreases inflammation, of course. We talked a little bit about that with the liver. Anytime it processes things and food, it's going to have some bit of inflammation. It decreases the energy and nutrient supply for those rapidly dividing cells. That allows them to survive when it comes to it. So it's basically like just turning off that faucet so it doesn't have that huge supply anymore. So after a while, it just weakens. There's actually some good studies that are starting to go on now with chemotherapy patients and stuff, and talking about fasting beforehand to strengthen your good cells too, which is really cool to see. So that fasting can strengthen your good cells. So then when you get that radiation kind of blast, your good cells are strengthened, your bad cells are weakened. So it's going to take out the bad ones versus all of the cells too. So once again, those are more still in the mix. The problem is with all the studies on fasting is no pharmaceutical, no food industry company wants to fund it because it's free and it costs a lot of money to do research, unfortunately. So just a lot of people that are just voluntarily trying some things like this. One thing that autophagy can do too is it can help DNA repair itself. And stem cell production does increase in the later stages of fasting too. So it might be recycling and getting rid of the bad stuff, but it also might be saying, hey, we need to repair this cell, or this one's damaged, we need to replace it. Whenever our body goes back into the fed state, it totally ignores, cleaning up, repairing, and replacing. So that's kind of the balance to it. It's really hard myself to stay away from sweets and stay away from food, especially when I'm having a hard day, because I know it's there to kind of comfort me and make me feel good in the short run. But I do try to, after Thanksgiving sometimes, or after I just pigged out, I try to go a little bit longer time just to balance up my body, because I just ate a lot of food that I'm probably not going to use up, if that makes sense. Just trying to like balance your bank account, in other words. Okay. All right. Keep asking questions. Great questions so far. One of the big ones is fasting safe? Very good question. Very important. I can't recap this enough about drinking water, how important that is to keep oil in your engine. You don't have oil in your engine, you know what it does? It combusts. So we don't want your kidneys to combust. So that's always good to prevent dehydration. Fasting safe, it is if you're prepared to lower your insulin levels. If you're on insulin pump, you might think about lowering it right around or a little bit after that time that you usually eat. You might put on a temp basal. You might go 75% insulin. You might go 50%. Those are just general ways to help prevent low blood sugars. I think we're all pretty well versed at reacting to low blood sugars to talk about that. I'm not medically recommending this, but this is a possible idea just in case we have any of those other health conditions or health risks, cognitively, cardiovascularly, etc. Some of the stuff we see in each and every medication commercial. This could cause your head to fall off, cancer, diarrhea, vomiting, etc. Now, fasting, this can happen, but it doesn't happen that often. This is more for the people that are going balls to the walls right away. They're going for the hardest fasts. They will have probably more side effects. So like I said, if you're starting this first, you might go into intermittent fasting first. You might go for 12 hours, then go to 14, then go to 16. You don't want to just jump into a 3 or 7 day fast because your body's going to be like, what the heck are you doing to me? Diarrhea can happen because you're not processing so much food. So after a while, your stomach acid and your body is so geared up and it's ready to process all that food, and it's like nothing's coming. So it can get a little bit more runny when it comes to it, but it usually decreases in frequency and stuff. It just gets a little bit more, just there's less hard food for your body to process. Other side effects that people state, sometimes insomnia, if you're, you know, feeling like I can't go to bed on a empty stomach or something like that. So some people can have that, not everybody. Of course, that dizziness and fatigue, I don't recommend doing a fast, especially if you haven't done it, right before you run a marathon or right afterwards, or after you do a workout when it comes to it. It's a journey to get to know how your body works a little bit more. It's not going to be this one thing that cures everything, but it definitely can jumpstart your system, and it can help it balance itself out. Of course, we talked about hypoglycemia. Headaches can happen, but drinking water can help. Various skin reactions. Now, why can some of these things happen? Well, our body is very good at storing either foreign objects or storing fat or storing extra glucose. So when those prison cells, it's almost like, I think about it like a prison cell. If we ate mercury or something else that's toxic for our system, our body's going to do the best it can at getting rid of it or at barricading it and blocking it from going into other things. Lots of times our fat cells are barricades, or almost prison cells, to keep it from affecting other things. So if our body starts to open up a lot of those fat cells all at once, or for certain people, it starts to open those up, and some of those toxins start to release in the body, you can start to have some small side effects when it comes to it. I'm not trying to say it's huge side effects, but our body's going to be opening up some of that extra storage, and sometimes that can give you some various skin reactions, headaches, or some other stuff. Okay, but nothing too crazy. Once again, if you do fast, you can always stop it. If it's like, I plan to do this for one day or 16 hours and I just can't do it, you can stop it at 14 and 12, whatever, when it comes to it. The only problem right now is there's no current way to prescribe a fast to a specific individual. It's different. It's up to them to kind of explore what their boundaries are. But it is, for some people, a natural remedy that they can utilize on their own, a cheap, a very inexpensive remedy to help them, people helping them in obesity battles, helping them with cancer battles, helping them with cardiovascular battles. When it comes to it, when no other medication is working or they're just getting side effects when it comes to it. So I think it's a good investment. Of course, a lot of times people don't want to do it until it's there's nothing left to experiment with. So I just look at this as a chance to experiment, to know my limits a little bit ahead of time, so that if that time comes for me, I'm a little bit more equipped to experiment and try that out.
Brad, I thought I read something, but I'm not going to be eloquent with it, but that's a fast will kind of tame down the immune system a little bit too. Have you read that?
You mean the immune reaction, like
Yes,
the autoimmune?
yes,
Yep.
the response.
Yeah, so they hypothesize that with multiple sclerosis, which attacks the myelin sheath, and a few other autoimmune diseases, it starts to allow some of the natural killer cells to self-destruct and kill themselves a little bit. So we have all kinds of cells in our body, and some of them are like, I don't know if they just get in their mind that they need to be vigilant and continuously work, but then they just never stop. But they should have a lifespan to them too. So when you kind of slow down things, you slow down this attack mode with your body, the inflammation goes down, and so does their purpose, basically. If inflammation goes down, their purpose of attacking inflammation or getting rid of it or whatever, their purpose goes down, and so then they start to fade. And your body makes new cells that are programmed more correctly. You know, it's not like they're tainted or biased. You know, they tried this sugar, or they tried Dairy Queen, and now they're addicted to Dairy Queen on every hot summer day. I'm just speaking on my own behalf, of course, but you know, fasting is a good way to kind of distance yourself from that. And but it also gives that body kind of that reset. This, you get the new cells that have better programming to them, less taintedness. And yeah, they're studying that with a lot of autoimmune diseases, which does pertain to type 1 diabetes, of course, when it comes to it. Yeah, great question. I hope, does that pertain to it? Cool. Right on. Yeah, you know, people talk about breaking the fast. When it comes to it, usually you want to kind of break it with something a little bit lighter, maybe more vegetables, maybe some more olive oil or healthier things for your body to get some nutrients. I did discuss the fast mimicking diet, which is much more attainable for people, so that, you know, when you're fasting, you're actually eating some healthier things like oils or certain nuts or legumes or vegetables. And it's almost like it's mimicking the body, where it's still decreasing that inflammation and it's allowing that body to reset. So it's not like people have to, you know, torture themselves with fasting. In my own experience, like I said, I think the hardest thing is just the social atmosphere and just feel like you're isolating yourself more. But what do we know about isolation nowadays anyways? I don't know, sorry. Got to get one of those in.
You could invite people for a fast. Come over to your house and don't cook a thing.
Yeah, and be 6 feet away from each other at least in the driveway. Yeah, talk about it. See who has the best effects or the worst side effects. I just look at it as a journey, and fasting is really foreign to our culture nowadays, but it was something that was utilized, you know, for our ancestors for a long period of time. The problem was they didn't have the modern medicine to go with it. Kind of like they got a cut and they got infected and they ended up dying. So it's kind of like, why didn't they live longer then, if that was the case? So this could be a turning point or something that helps us out. Lisa, you've tried fasting a couple times. Do you want to talk a little bit about it? How you felt the first time and then the other time frame?
Well, I'll back it up with, ever since I've had diabetes, which is a very long time, I've always felt the best when I don't eat. And, you know, I used to think, well, is that, you know, because of the blood sugar stuff? And so, you know, I changed my diet so I wouldn't get the spikes, but I always feel like cleaner, clear when I don't eat. So I thought, well, I'll try it and I'll see what happens. And I get the little spike in the morning. But I have the tandem pump, and that has that basal IQ. I don't have the control, but the basal. So it would just keep, you know, keep shutting off. I got hungry once, but I think that was more of a, that's the time I ate, you know, that's when I ate lunch. I'm not usually hungry in the morning, so that's not hard, but maybe around lunchtime. And so I just drank some water and I thought, well, I can break this at any time. But the second time I did it, I did cut my basal back to 75%, and that kept me pretty stable. I was between 85 and 100 the whole day, but I've been doing it when it's 100 degrees outside and it's a heat index and I don't want to eat anyways. So that, you know, I don't know in winter when it's freezing to death, if, you know, water's going to cut it. But I noticed the time that I did it from the night before through to the following night, or it was actually dinner time, that felt better. I just felt cleaner when I had breakfast, and then I went the next day until breakfast. It, you know, I don't know, maybe I was releasing, you know, more stuff, but I'm just kind of interested to see, after I've read about it, you know, what it can do. Because I don't feel good when I eat 3 meals a day, or if I snack. I just feel bogged down. So so that's my personality. I've always felt better when I don't eat. Everything feels even. My blood sugar's stable. It feels really good. It's like feeling normal, I guess. I don't remember what that feels like, but I'm guessing. So that's why it appeals to me, because I don't have the roller coaster, and, I just feel better, if that makes any sense.
Mhm. Good. Thank you. Anybody else want to talk about a time of not eating or any trials with it? I identified with you too about the blood sugars. Blood sugars are just very calm during it. You might have a slight downslope. So as that temp basal goes down a little bit more, the blood sugars are just like glass, just water that's just like glass basically, which is kind of nice to have. Sometimes I do fast when my blood sugars are really high because I'm just like, God, this is not coming down for the life of it. And then sometimes when my blood sugar comes down into that normal range, I kind of almost feel guilty eating because I just came down into that nice range. And I'm like, now I'm just going to destroy it again. I'm just like, what's going on? So being able to know that I can do this offers me a couple of different solutions that weren't there before, I guess. And sometimes I just make my decisions based on what do I want my blood sugar line to look like. I'm sure I'm not alone alone with that with a lot of you guys. Sometimes I just fast because I want just a better blood sugar line. I just don't eat. I could eat this, I could eat that, but I know how much I'm going to be struggling over the next couple hours trying to balance that out, especially when I'm not moving is usually the issue.
I'll say the other part of it too. I expected to be tired or foggy, and I wasn't. I vacuumed. I was, kind of doing stuff around the house, but um, I didn't feel bad,
Mm-hmm.
which surprised me. That surprised me. I thought I'd feel like exhausted and starving.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't.
Thank you for sharing that. It's good to get a little bit more of that rather than I'm the only kook here. Just kidding.
I'll join your club.
But of course, guys that are just tuning in too, it's always important to, I would say, yes, talk to your doctor about it, but I just don't really see any doctors that are going to be like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. The biggest thing is knowing how to change your insulin doses and your insulin levels. If you don't know, this is probably not the best for you because you're going to run into a low blood sugar. I did have that happen to me a couple times and I just had to break my fast. I was not going to allow my blood sugar to go down to 0 or go down to, 40, 50, anything like that, just because I made a pact with doing a fast. I just learned how to change my insulin doses a little bit differently the next time around that I did it. So it's just like more of an experimental thing. If anybody's trying to do that, you're welcome to call me. That's actually like no cost. I would just want to make sure that you're safe when you're doing it. But it is a possible chance to kind of reset the body to get it working a little bit better again, to balance it out from all the food that we tend to eat. I know we don't have the state fair this year, so we don't have to balance it out that much, but
Brad, let me jump in. In 1994, I saw a doctor who had type 1. He was a Muslim doctor.
Oh, yeah.
And he was actively teaching patients how to fast because they were doing it for religious purposes. So, he doesn't work with patients anymore. He's not even in the state. But so at that time, it just didn't, even register. I thought it was just something that they were doing for religious purposes. So, I never asked him about it, unfortunately, but it's not unheard of. It's just, you have to kind of fish to hear about it. So.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just some systems where if it's not in protocol at all, and I don't think it's a protocol for any system. I know there's certain people with seizures now are starting to do different diets like fasting or ketosis diets. However, it's not widely adopted either. So rarely will you ever hear a medical person talk about it. Now, it's not that it's horrible or anything like that. It's just, it just doesn't get studied as frequently as all these other drugs or all these foods do, because you have the health industry, or you have the pharmaceutical industry, because you have the food industry, who, you know, that's what they do each and every day. They're selling those things. So fasting, you know, there's no industry for that at this point in time. It's just kind of a spiritual thing that we've heard about at one point in time, and now we're starting to kind of get reacquainted with it. Type 2 diabetes, it's starting to become a little bit more prevalent with fasting. There are some people with type 2 diabetes that definitely have started to reverse it almost altogether. I know Dr. Jason Fung is a big doctor that advocates for it. He's actually a Canadian doctor. But he does have that book, The Diabetes Code. Once again, it's more type 2 related. So it's really cool to see that work with some, you know, with a specific illness, and that will probably be the next one where fasting will start to get prescribed, I would say. But that's usually for people with a little bit more weight, obesity, some of those things. And once again, it's their decision and stuff. It's a matter of, do we keep living with that, or do we, and then we have all these medications, or do we change something up and we kind of start to get rid of some of the medications and stuff? Because it's not like it's bad to, you know, it's not like it's inherently bad if someone chooses to do the medications or drink 5 cans of Coke a day. That's their decision when it comes to it. So, yeah. Anyways. So these are a couple of my links and stuff. I can send this stuff out to. I was going by this first article, New England Journal of Medicine, for a few of the improvements. A lot of this has been extensively researched with rodents and mice and some animals. Humans are just starting to do that over the last 5 years more for the scientific research when it comes to it. And so when we're talking about cholesterol and blood pressure and triglycerides, that's all, majority of that's from humans and stuff. The cognitive things are really hard to measure, and that takes many more decades. So we're seeing that with animals for sure, reduction and reversal of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. For people, we're just starting to see a reduction in the progression or a slight reversal. So humans has happened a little bit different, but people are starting to implement that. I got my own plug here too, guys. If if anybody's looking to diabetes services, I'm willing to be a coach, a mentor. I'm always available. You don't have to go into a phone system and try to get a hold of me. And I can help you out with, you know, fitness programs, nutrition in general, diabetes technology. If you want to trial Control IQ or Loop or anything like that, I offer some things like that. I am trying to keep the fee very nominal. That's why I'm not going through insurance companies. And, you know, for any of the people I know, it's obviously much more reduced. But I just got that thing there. So, yeah.
Yeah, Brad's got me started on the Loop, and it's amazing. I mean, like, I don't even go up to 300. I think I only went up to 300 once, and then I just back down. But I used to just ride at 300, 200 all the time. But yeah, I don't know. This
Good
thing's
for
pretty.
you.
I know, right, dude? Then the other day I had a cookie and I forgot to dose for it, and I think I only went up to one. I was like at 180 or something only after I had a couple cookies, and I forgot to like dose. As opposed to going to like 100.
So the tough part with managing diabetes is we're still Americans, so we're living in that rat race where we're working and we're doing all these things, and sometimes we forget, of course. The Control IQ or looping do compensate now. Also, Joyce knows well with the Medtronic 670 that that can compensate a little bit as well too. so that when we take our eye off of diabetes, we have something that we trust that's helping to kind of lasso our blood sugar either down or up when we need it. So that's always really nice. I know for me at least, it helps decrease my thoughts of managing diabetes by about 2 to 4 hours per day. So, I mean, those can help when it comes to it. Everybody's different. And if anybody wants to ever talk about that one-to-one or whatever, that's completely free or whatever. You know, the tough part is we get attached to a system and then we're on it for 4 years and that's our sentence and stuff. But there is ways to go about the system, navigate it, trial out some of them, see if it's for you before you decide to go with a specific pump or CGM when it comes to it. Okay. No update on that new insulin being on the market yet. It's still not on the market. Libre 2 is still not available from our previous discussion. We're just in a COVID stasis right now. So no new updates, and unfortunately a lot of studies are on hold. So I hope they find a way to get those going again.
To interrupt you to jump back to that thought about, you know, we're like in a warranty for 4 years with a pump. Well, as long as you can show, your doctor can show like, holy cow, look at this patient, she did so much better. I demand that here's the letter that she's gonna switch. And here's the documented reasons why she's healthier. Like, I've got the proof, you know, huge proof, like 70% in range or what have ye, you know.
What do you think you were in range before, Laura?
Like 15%.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. Everybody's journey is different when it comes to it. And, you know, I mean, that's awesome. Just the improvement, you know, if we have a slight improvement or a decrease in the amount of time we need to invest in diabetes, that's awesome. That's huge.
Yeah. I wasn't running 600, so it's not like I'm blind and I don't have any feet, but, you know, I was on my way, you know.
Yeah, the nice thing is technology gets better, and we're hoping accessibility improves too.
Yeah, I hear you guys talk like, oh, I was 200, and I'm like, and I don't say anything usually because like I would just run 200 all the time. I just would keep my mouth shut.
I think we've all been through that, Laura, too. And I'll be honest, I had my pod. I was sweating and I was sandy as can be. I was in a volleyball tournament on just yesterday, and my pod started to come out, and I just ended up just ripping it off. And I had an extra pen that was in my backpack, and I thought I had injected some extra insulin, but that insulin wasn't working. I think it was in there for too long.
Oh yeah.
Bad, and so my blood sugar went up. I mean, it went up to 400. It's not fun.
Oh.
And it's not fun when you have to come back down either. But
so you just had to go to the bathroom a bunch, and like you just knew you were going high, and
no, I was just going off by my Dexcom. I actually didn't. I didn't have to go to the bathroom a whole bunch. I just when you're coming down from 400 though, you're just like, ah, crap, here it comes. You know, eventually.
What?
Here comes the low after a period of time. You know, when your blood sugar fluctuates so up and down, it gives you more chance to go down pretty hard.
Did you feel pretty crappy during that high?
You know, no, I didn't, but I, for the first time, had to drink straight Coca-Cola just to kind of keep it from going down. Usually I only drink that very occasionally with a little Captain Morgan or a little bit of Jameson, but I'm not perfect once again. Don't actually do what I do necessarily. I'm not perfect all the time. I don't claim to be.
Do what you say.
What's that?
It's do what you say, not what you do.
Yeah, I don't want to be that hypocrite though, but I just want people to know too, like I'm supposed to be a gold standard, of course, but there is no gold standard. It's just whatever your life is, and those tiny little improvements make a big deal over time. And there is no gold standard. Whatever you hold yourself to, great. don't compare yourself to anybody else because you're going to burn yourself out when it comes to it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a virtual tour de cure this year. And I had too many things going on, you know, besides COVID, my mom going into assisted living and hospice, and then passing away last week. I just didn't do anything this year. Maybe next year.
Before that, that's pretty good. How
So I-
was that? How was that in comparison to the 21-hour fast that you did?
Well, I think it was different. I think the fast where I woke up from the night before and I didn't have breakfast, that felt different than when I had breakfast that day and didn't eat till lunch the other day. So I felt like I felt better when I did it from the night before all the way through to that evening than when I ate breakfast and then did it. So I don't know if that's just because my body had to deal with breakfast. You know, I just, waking up in the morning and fasting seemed to feel a lot better.
Gotcha.
It didn't feel bad, but the last time I was like, oh, this really feels like I was detoxifying. So we'll see. I was thinking about when I have to work this Saturday, if I made it a fast day, that might that might feel like I'm accomplishing something other than exhaustion.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's the tough part is when you're like usually like, do I need this energy? I'm working, and you're probably doing some, you know, yard
It's
work. or
very
other things.
mental. It's not difficult, but you just have to pay
Mhm.
attention.
Yep. Otherwise, your autopilot will get you just like that.
Yep. And I mean, it's not really physical, you know. I mean, I guess it's physical for the upper body, maybe if you're lifting things and, you know, mailing things, but I'm on the computer most of the time doing the online stuff. So
Yeah. Gotcha.
you just have to pay attention and not push the wrong button or you swear.
hmm